All right, well, welcome everyone. I've got 2 o'clock by my watch, so we're going to go ahead and jump right in. So welcome to this next session. Our big picture topic that we're going to be discussing here is all about the resources that are available at the college level. So I'd like to introduce y'all to Mary Ellen Gardino, Krista Ackert, and Susan Jenkins from Marist, and I'm going to hand things over to them. But folks, please feel free if you have questions at any point, drop them in the chat and we will wrap back around to them at the end.
Thank you so much, Emily. Krista, myself, and Susan are really thrilled to be here today and to share some information with you. And by no means are we all experts in this. We're just sharing some information that we know that could really help you, as you move forward, maybe in your college search, if you're a parent or if you're an educator as well. So welcome again. My name is Mary Ellen Gardino, and I'm the director for the Accommodations office here at Marist. We are located on the beautiful Hudson River in Poughkeepsie, New York, an hour and a half south of Albany and an hour and a half north of the city. So our presentation today is called Recipes for Success, Understanding Disability and the Services at the College Level. All right. So we decided to go with the cooking theme here because we love food, and we thought it would be really, interesting. And we also thought, in every recipe, there's a bunch of steps that people need to follow in order to get a great product, right? So we figured we would give you all the different ingredients to really come out with a great recipe and knowing, what to expect, going from high school to college. So the first ingredient is obviously the definition of disability. So as you can see in the slide, it says a disability is a condition of the body or mind. So we have that impairment that really makes it more difficult for the person with the condition to do certain activities. So there's that activity limitation and to interact with the world around them. So there's participation restrictions. So again, that impairment is relating to the person's body and their mental functioning. The activity limitation could be things such as walking, seeing, hearing, problem solving. And then participation restrictions really go into talking about our regular, normal, daily, and social activities. It's deeply diverse, as we all know, and it affects everybody. It affects all genders, races, sexual orientations, geographic regions, age groups, and socioeconomic levels. So when we think about functional limitations, we think about aspects of physical, mobility, dexterity, strength, stamina. We think of sensory, so things such as our sight or hearing or speech or touch, and then brain-based, which is based on our learning, our development, mental health, and cognitive. Obviously, there's tons of different disabilities out there, right? But these are just some of the ones that we might experience, in our world: mobility disabilities, low vision, blind, hard of hearing, deaf, and even intellectual disabilities. It's really important to remember that, not all disabilities are apparent. They're not all visible. So there's things such as, and we see at the college level all the time, ADHD, anxiety, depression, a learning disability. Those are examples of, disabilities that are not apparent and they're not visible. All right, so the biggest thing is, now that we've, put the groundwork down for understanding what disability is and the different types of disabilities out there, is really understanding the statistics about disabilities in a college setting and what do we see most in a college setting. So just to kind of put statistics out there, there's 26% of adults in the United States have some type of disability. It's a natural process, right? Most everyone has or will experience some disability during their lifetime. So it's important to keep that in mind. Nearly 1 in 4 people have a disability in the US, and 61 million adults have a disability in the United States. So this is a common thing that we all experience. At the college level, and I'm sure most of you can relate to this if you do work in a college setting, that about 19% of all undergraduate traditional students enrolled in college identify as having some type of disability or are registered with the Accommodations office on a college campus. And as we know, there's evidence to say that, especially coming out of this pandemic, that there's an increasing number of students with disabilities that are entering college. 31% have learning disabilities or identify with that, 18% ADHD, psychiatric disabilities. So, 15%, health and chronic is 11%, and mobility is 7%. So again, this is just on the average of, how many students are enrolled with a disability in a college setting, and then the types that we may see most frequently in a college setting. So the third ingredient is laws. So when we get to college, how is it different than high school, right? So at the college level, we follow the Americans with Disabilities Act, which was passed into law in 1990. It was amended in 2008. And as we all know, it prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in any public sphere. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 is any agency or institution that is receiving any type of federal financial assistance must follow the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And again, same kind of notion of the Americans with Disabilities Act. It prohibits from discriminating against anyone based on their disability. So in high school, you may have followed the IDEA, Individual with Disabilities Education Act, and some people may have had a 504. At the college, we follow the Americans with Disabilities Act, and we follow the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. So those are the laws that we follow here at Marist, and colleges follow around the world in the United States. So I'm going to transfer it over now to Krista, who will continue to talk to you about reasonable accommodations and accessibility.
Hi, everybody. I'm Krista Ackert. I'm one of the assistant directors at Marist College Office of Accommodations and Accessibility, as well as a learning specialist. And I'm going to talk to you about the fourth ingredient, which is reasonable accommodations and accessibility. So reasonable accommodations is an adaptation or modification to meet the needs of a person. We create for the average and accommodate the others. And accessibility is the degree to where products and systems can be used effectively by the widest range of people. There are several examples of academic accommodations. Books in alternate format can be used with a Learning Ally and several other formats. Note-taking services such as the LiveScribe pen, as well as testing accommodations, which would include extended time, readers, scribes, calculators, computers, and the use of assistive technology. And these, of course, are provided based on the student's specific disability. Now I'll talk to you about differences between high school and college. And for those of you who do work in a college, know that there can be many differences. And also a transition into college can be very different for those students coming from high school. So a student's role when they are coming into college may be very different than that when they were in high school. In high school, the student is identified by the school. The school has the primary responsibility for arranging the accommodations, and the teacher's approach is that they believe you need the assistance. In a college, the student is suggested to self-identify, and they have the primary responsibility for self-advocacy and arranging for the accommodations, as well as professors are expecting students to seek help if needed. Just as the student's role is different in the college setting, a parent's role is also different. In high school, parents have access to the student's records and can participate in the accommodation process. They can also advocate for the student. When the student goes to college, the parent does not have access to the student's records without written consent from the student, and the student is expected to advocate for themselves. Another difference between high school and college is the way testing is done. In high school, the IEP or the 504 plan may include modifications to test formats and/or grading. Testing can be frequent and covers a small quantity of material, and the teachers are often taking time to remind students of due dates and assignments that are required. In college, the students, the grading and the test format changes are generally not available. Accommodations to how tests are given are available. Testing is often infrequent and covers larger amounts of material and may be cumulative, and makeup tests are frequently not an option. The study responsibilities and student expectations can also be different between high school and college. In high school, the time and assignments are structured by others. There's a daily schedule that follows a routine. Students are expected, the study expectations may be a little as 0 to 2 hours a week, and generally last minute test preparation. Students are not expected to learn or study information beyond what is covered in class and often provided in review or a study guide. The structuring guidance is also provided. Whereas in college, students must manage their own time and complete assignments independently. Their daily schedule is not consistent, may have large blocks of time with no classes or labs. The study expectations are 2 to 3 hours outside of class for each hour spent in class. And the pursuit of inquiry and research is expected, as well as the assimilation of information, the notes and the reading and the research is the student's responsibility. Independence and self-sufficiency is of course expected. The sixth ingredient that we're going to talk about is to know your options. Colleges are required by law to provide accommodations to students with documented disabilities. And some colleges offer specialized programs. Some offer only the support services, and others will have both options. So those colleges that do have programs that are created for students with disabilities and offer more in-depth services and accommodations. Many are designed for students with learning disabilities and/or ADHD. And these programs usually have a fee-based program that is in addition to the tuition costs. Many times there's one-on-one tutoring and weekly meetings with a specialist are usually provided. Those colleges that will only have the support services include the reasonable accommodations such as extended time for testing, note-taking assistance, and the use of a calculator or a computer, as well as preferential seating, readers, and scribes, etc. And here's Susan, and she will be talking to you about self-advocacy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Jenkins. I'm another assistant director in the office. I'm also a learning specialist for the Office of Accommodations at Marist. I just wanted to talk to you all about the seventh ingredient in our recipe for college success, which is self-advocacy. So basically, self-advocacy boils down to three things: knowing yourself, knowing what you need, and knowing how to get what you need. So before coming to college, like while you're still in high school, it's really important to start asking yourself these questions as a high school student. You want to ask yourself, how comfortable do I feel speaking with other adults? Can I go to my teachers and advisors? Can I go to my guidance counselor and ask them for things that I need? Am I willing to ask for help when I encounter challenges, or do I usually go to my mom or, to that one teacher? So think about how comfortable you are when you encounter challenges. Do you know what accommodations you're entitled to? And think about, when was the last time you ever looked over your documentation? When was the last time you ever looked at your IEP or your 504 plan? So there are steps that you can take to become a great self-advocate. And one of those steps is to do some role playing. We do quite a bit of role play with students in our own office, but this is something that you can do as a high schooler to prepare yourself when you step onto that college campus. So role playing, you can do that by practicing explaining your needs to a counselor or friend. If you have a teacher that you're super comfortable with, you can go practice, talking to them about your accommodations. Also practice talking to them about your rights and explaining them to your teacher or a counselor or a friend. Also, while you're still in high school, approach your teachers and talk to them about your needs, your strengths, and your challenges. So another way to become a great self-advocate is to know how you learn. So it's super important to know what your learning style is. For example, are you a visual learner? Are you auditory? You know, are you a kinesthetic learner? Know how you process information and practice explaining that to others. Think about what types of accommodations you use the most in high school. You know, for example, do you really rely on note takers? Do you enjoy using audiobooks? You know, are you an auditory learner? So start to think about those things and really try to understand how you learn best. So some people will say, why do I need to do this? You know, I've never had to do this before. But it is super important to learn to self-advocate. And the reason why is because when you get to college, it's actually your responsibility as a college student to self-identify your needs to others. So for example, if you need accommodations in a classroom, you need to be able to go up to that professor and talk to them about the things that you need. You're also going to have to approach the Disability Services Office or the Office of Accommodations, and you're going to have to bring them your documentation and sit down and talk to somebody about what types of accommodations you'll need. So it's super important to try to start in high school getting comfortable with being able to have those conversations and also understanding what accommodations you currently receive and what's going to work for you in college. So the 8th ingredient in our recipe for success is campus resources. So if you will, you know, before, you know, when you're trying to find a college, one thing that I would highly recommend is just like put in a Google search, you know, what type of student resources are there available at that college that you're interested in? Do they have a writing center? Do they have a math lab? Do they have tutoring services? Do they have a learning support program for students with disabilities? So think about what types of supports you might need or think that you might need and look to see if that college has that. You know, most colleges have counseling services, they have career services, they have health services. So usually there's a myriad of resources available for students on college campuses. Now, the final ingredient we're going to talk about today is parents. So parents can play a huge role in preparing their student for college. And one of the ways that they can help, it actually, you know, seems, you know, kind of like it's not helping, but it really does help when you resist the urge to solve every problem for your young adult. So instead of trying to solve a problem for your child, you know, instead ask them, you know, what do you think we should do in this situation? You know, if a teacher forgets to give you extended time or notes, you know, what do you think you should do? You know, what kind of conversation should that be? Also encourage your young adult to take part in their IEP meeting or their 504 meeting. Encourage that young adult to advocate for him or herself and start to encourage them to use things like iPhone timers. There's all kinds of apps on the iPhone that can help them to remember, you know, to go to soccer practice or, you know, remember to put their book in their book bag or that kind of thing. So encourage them to start doing those things on their own. And then lastly, try to make your young adult responsible for things that they can start doing now, like their laundry, arranging transportation to events, making appointments, you know, for the dentist, for the doctor, that kind of thing. Things that in college they're going to have to start taking on, you know, on their own. Okay, so thank you. And let us know if you have any questions.
One of the things I also wanted to mention as well, for those of you who are going off to college or parents or educators who may be on the call, is when they get to college, they will get what's called an accommodation letter. And so basically, when you submit documentation to the accommodations office, you in turn will get usually an accommodation letter, which will outline the types of accommodations that you'll get at the college level. So it could be things ranging, you know, what Krista was mentioning, note-taking services, extended time, maybe a computer or whatever it may be. And so we encourage our students specifically at Marist, you know, to bring that accommodation letter to their professors. And that's how the professors are kind of, you know, brought into the loop or brought into the know that the student is getting these accommodations. And then the other thing too is, really getting familiar with the assistive technology out there, because that will be your best friend when you go to college. At Marist, we have a whole page on our internal My Marist page that has tons of different assistive technology apps on things such as reading, writing, time management. And the more familiar you get with them, the better it will help you when you get to college. And these assistive technology apps will not only help you in the college setting, but they will help you actually in life after college as well. We use a slew of assistive technology at Marist. We have things that are called the Live Scribe pen, which is a pen that records as you're taking notes, and it syncs up with your notes and your recording. We use C pen readers, which actually you can highlight when you're taking a test if you get a reader as an accommodation, and it'll actually read the test to you. So there's, tons of different technology out there that different colleges use. So I just wanted to, kind of throw that out to you as well, just to remember to start utilizing some of those apps so that when you get to college, you'll feel a lot more prepared on that. Emily, we can throw it back to you now, because I know you were monitoring the chat for us. I don't know if anybody has any questions for us or wants us to go over anything in particular. We didn't want to talk to you for a full 30 minutes. We wanted to kind of have good engagement with those on the call to kind of answer their questions too.
Okay, well, it looks like at the moment we don't have any questions in the chat, but we can give folks a few moments to drop any questions that they have in there. And in the meantime, while we're waiting to see if any of those pop up, I'm going to go ahead and drop into the chat the link for our next session, because if we don't have any questions come up, then we can, then you guys will go ahead and have a little bit of a break. Oh, okay, so it looks like got a question about what some of the most frequent questions that you get from parents and families are.
Yeah, that's a great question. So at Marist, just to kind of track back a little bit, so we have 3 distinct parts, and that will answer your question, but also clarify the things. We have 3 distinct parts in our office. So we have general accommodations where students come in, they've gone into Marist, and they're just, they have a disability and they're getting accommodations through us. We also have a federal TRIO grant, which is a 5-year grant. So you have to be first generation, low income, and a student with a disability to qualify for that grant. And then we have what's called our learning support program. So that's probably where we get most of our questions, is through our learning support program. So a lot of times parents, and that's a fee-based program, and they have to apply to our program. And if they get in, they get into Marist. So thinking about some of the questions that parents will ask is, what type of documentation you may need in order to get services at the college level. So we always say that, we need current documentation. A lot of times people want to submit documentation from like 8th grade and 7th grade. And the problem with that is that you change so much, from 7th and 8th grade up to 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. So we would really like the most current. We also, in our documentation, like to have an adult scale for an IQ test, so the WACE. But, that's one of the big questions that we get. A lot of parents will ask us, what the differences between high school and college are, in terms of they're not getting modifications at the college level, they're getting accommodations only. So things such as testing accommodations, scribe, computer, note-taking services. Another big question that parents will ask is, can I communicate with you on a weekly basis? And so, we do have a waiver in our program where we can speak to parents, but we really like to work with the student because, it's developing that self-advocacy, but we do check in with parents here and there. But that's, some of the bigger questions that we usually get. I don't know, Susan and Krista, if you want to add on to any other questions that we might get asked that I'm forgetting too.
No, I think you covered it, Mary Ellen. Yeah.
I agree. I think you got it all.
And I think one of the bigger other things too is that sometimes we'll get asked the question, and I know Kristen went over this, like, should I just go to college and get the general accommodations, or do I need a specific program? And that's a big question we get. And the honest truth is, it really depends on your needs. So, what Susan was talking about, that self-advocacy and understanding your strengths and understanding your weaknesses and really identifying, what do you need at the college level? Do you need to meet with someone on a weekly basis? Then maybe you need the support program or a support program. But if you feel like you just need those accommodations, extended time, note-taking services, then maybe you just need those services. So that is a big question that we get all the time. And again, it goes back to knowing, your needs and knowing what you're going to need to be successful at the college level.
And one other thing I just can't stress enough is if to please practice using assistive technology while you are in high school. I can't tell you how many times we have students who come to college and it's the first time they're using a LiveScribe pen. And there is a bit of a learning curve with assistive technology. So, you just want to, if you are already practiced in how to use a LiveScribe pen, or if you already know that you use books in audio format, you're just that much more ahead, when you do get on the college campus. So please, practice using that assistive technology now. Practice using the note-taking apps in your classes that you're taking now, because you're going to be that much more ahead when you get to the college classroom.
Susan, that's a great segue into one of the questions that popped up in the chat about whether students can only use assistive technology with permission from the college, or whether they can just arrive and use the technology if they've already been using it. And so examples being that LiveScribe or readers or note-taking services.
Right, and students, can certainly use, if they come to college with a LiveScribe pen and they've already been using it, know how to use it, they can continue using that. I have a lot of students who come to college knowing how to use Notability, and they just continue using that, because they know that that is helpful for them. So yes, certainly they can, if they're already practiced in a specific type of assistive technology, they can go ahead and continue to use that. They don't really have to tell anybody that they're using it.
And that's one of the great questions to ask too when you're visiting colleges. What kind of assistive technology do you use, at your institution? This year we implemented what's called Glean, which is a note-taking application platform. So students are able to get one of the licenses and they can record in the classroom. Other schools might use different platforms and different technology. So it's great to know, if you really like this assistive technology, you may also want to find a program that uses that, or, very often.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like we've got another question about assistive technology, whether there's a resource with a list of assistive technology options.
Yeah, and Mary Ellen, I believe we do have a list on our website of assistive technology options. And I have noticed, just kind of cruising through other college websites, there usually are some, somewhere on that disability services page, they usually do list, the types of assistive technology that they offer. So yeah, that's a great question and a great thing to look for when you're looking at, different colleges.
It looks like we've got one other question in the chat right now. For students with IDD or more severe disabilities, are there options in colleges?
Yeah, so there's, Krista, do you want to take that one?
Sure. It's always important, obviously, to look into the colleges and see what is available to make sure it fits the student's needs. Many times it'll be through the general accommodations office. If there might be a special program that addresses what the student needs, but sometimes you would just go through your general accommodations department and be able to ask questions of that person as to, what could help to really fit what it is you're looking for. But again, really looking into the colleges to find a fit that's going to be the best one for the student. I don't know if Mary Ellen or Susan, if you have anything else to add to that.
No, I think you made a great point. We get a lot of times students that call our office, or parents, and for our program, you have to have a primary diagnosis of a learning disability or ADHD. So if for example, your primary diagnosis may be autism, you wouldn't qualify for our program, but you could qualify, if you applied to Marist and got in, and you could just get general accommodations through our office. However, there are other programs out there that do serve, for students that are on the spectrum. There are all different types of programs out there. So I think you made a great point, Krista, is just doing your homework and looking at what each school has to offer. I always say to students, like, regardless if they come to Marist or not, is to make a list of all the schools that you went to, and on each page have like a pro and con list. And that really is helpful, because it's like a diary that you can keep when you go to all these places of what different services they have, what are the accommodations, what are, the different programs that are offered, because it can be overwhelming, and there's a lot of different options out there. And as they say, there's something for everybody out there. There's a right school for every person, and it may not be Marist, and it may not be wherever, but there's always a place for everyone, and just doing your homework and looking at them. And the web pages are great because they're very comprehensive. A lot of the schools have great information on their web pages about their programs, about general accommodations, and so on. So.
All right. Well, I don't see any more questions in the chat, so just want to give a big thank you and round of applause to our presenters. Thank you, Krista, Susan, and Mary Ellen, for being here and for sharing this information with us. We really appreciate it. And go ahead and drop that link to the next session in the chat. If anybody has any other questions that you want to pop in with, please feel free to. Otherwise, you got a little bit of a break, and we'll see you at 3 o'clock for the next session.
Thank you, Emily.